Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read Pride and Prejudice S for 4091, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Chapter 4, The Letter. Lizzie went straight out after breakfast, trying to clear her head with fresh air. She hadn't gone far along her usual walk when she saw Mr. Darcy ahead of her. She turned away, but he called her name, came after her, and gave her a letter. "Will you read this for me?" he asked. Instinctively, she took it. Mr. Darcy gave a slight bow and walked away. Intrigued, Lizzie began to read. "Don't be alarmed, Miss Bennet. I'm not going to repeat my offer of marriage. Yesterday, you accused me of two things. I only want the chance to defend myself. It wasn't long before I realized Bingley was in love, but as I studied your sister, it didn't seem to me that she loved him. And as I watched your family at the Netherfield ball, I became convinced that Bingley was about to become trapped in a marriage with an unsuitable family and a girl who did not love him. So I went with Bingley to London, where I told him that Jane did not return his affection. After that, it wasn't hard to persuade him never to return to Netherfield. As for Mr. Wickham, he has not told you the whole truth. I offered him the job of clergyman as my father requested in his will. Wickham turned it down. Instead, he asked for money to study law, which I gave him, but he frithered it away. Then, last summer, he tried to run away with my sister to force her to marry him. Not because he loved her, but because he wanted her money. If your dislike of me makes you doubt me, do ask my cousin, Mr. the Fitzwilliam. I will only add, God bless you, Darcy." How could he know Jane's true feelings, thought Lizzie, still fuming, though her face burned with shame when she remembered how her family had behaved that night. With shaking hand, she read on. Lizzie didn't see either Darcy or Fitzwilliam before they left. By the time she was making her own journey home, she felt she knew Darcy's letter by heart. How could she have been so wrong? She who always prided herself on her insight. As her anger faded, she realized that Jane did hide her true feelings, even from those closest to her. She thought how she had praised Wickham, been blinded by his charm. At least she didn't have to face Wickham again. The officers had gone to the Brighton. Lizzie was anxious to discover that Lydia had gone with them, in the company of one of her friends. "Call her back, Papa," she begged. "She'll only become more giddy and foolish away from home, and how Lydia affects us all, how we are all judged." Mr. Bennet left. "Do you mean to say Lydia is frightening away husband for you and Jane? Don't make yourself uneasy, my love. Wherever you and Jane go, you will be respected and valued." Lizzie had to leave it at that. She was glad she had one thing to look forward to, a trip with her aunt and uncle, the gardeners. "We have decided to go to Derbyshire," her aunt wrote. Instantly, Lizzie thought of Pemberley, Mr. Darcy's home. "But surely," she thought, "I can't go to Derbyshire without seeing him." Trip was delayed once, twice, until at last they set out, Lizzie longing to see new sights. Chapter 5, Pemberley. After a few weeks, they came to town where Lizzie's aunt had spent the summers as a child. "We're not far from Pemberley," said Mrs. Gardiner. "I have heard it's a very impressive house. Don't you want to see it, Lizzie?" Lizzie thought of the embarrassment of seeing Darcy again, but the innkeeper where they were staying assured her that the family was away, so to Pemberley they went. They approached Pemberley through a large park. The driveway wound through woods, and then, at the top of a hill, Lizzie had a first view of the house. It stood on the opposite side of a valley, above a winding river and gently sloping banks. Lizzie was delighted. She had never seen a more beautiful spot, and to think I could have been mistress of all this. The housekeeper showed them the lofty, elegant rooms, filled with fine furniture. This place could have been my home, thought Lizzie in wonder. They passed the portrait of Mr. Darcy, hanging above the stairs. "And this is your master?" asked Mrs. Gardiner. "Yes, and I know none so handsome," said the housekeeper proudly. "He's a good master. I haven't had a cross word from him in all my life." Lizzie longed to hear more. She turned back to look at the portrait, smiling down at her. In that moment, she felt gentler towards him. She thought of his love for her and remembered its warmth rather than the way he expressed it. They walked out across the lawn, and to her astonishment, there he was, 20 yards in front of her. Their eyes met. They both blushed. He started, then came towards her. He spoke politely, and Lizzie listened, amazed at the change in him. He too seemed ill at ease. He asked her the same question twice, as if his thoughts were distracted. Then he recollected himself and asked to be introduced to her aunt and uncle, greeting them warmly. "I thought you weren't coming until tomorrow," said Lizzie, desperate to let him know she hadn't pursued him here. "We came early," he said. "My sister is here too. Just arrived. Will you come inside? She's eager to meet you." His sister's eagerness, Lizzie thought, must depend on what Darcy had told her. Did he still love her then, after all she had said to him? Over the next few days, they saw each other frequently. Darcy invited them to dinner, and he and his sister made morning calls to the inn where they were staying. Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner watched and wondered. It was clear to them, when they saw Darcy, that he was very much in love. But they couldn't guess Lizzie's feelings. On the fourth day, a letter arrived from Jane. "Dearest Lizzie, we have just had bad news. Lydia has left Brighton and run away with Mr. Wickham. They have been traced as far as London, and it doesn't seem as if they have any plans to marry. Our father has gone to London to see if he can find them. To return, we read our uncle's help at this terrible time." Hey, stop. Turn it off. And put all these things back. Oh, okay. Now you get back to the table. Start your homework now. Lizzie started up, about to run out of the door in search of her uncle, when Mr. Darcy came in. He saw her pale face and shaking hand. "What is it?" he cried at once. "What is the matter?" Lizzie couldn't answer him. Tears poured down her face. Darcy sent a servant out to fetch the gardeners. Then he waited until Lizzie could speak. "I can't hide the truth," she said. "Lydia, my youngest sister, has run away with Mr. Wickham to London. And to think I knew what he was like, but kept it a secret. If only I had said, how will they ever be found?" Darcy said nothing. He only walked up and down the room, frowning. Watching him, Lizzie thought how all this love for her must have vanished in that moment. How could he want to marry her, knowing her family's shameful secret? Now that she had no power over him, she realized for the first time how much she had grown to love him. Chapter 6 Love and Marriage. In Rome, she found the mother continually crying upstairs, and her father a changed man. I should have listened to you, Lizzie. You begged me to bring Lydia home again. Don't be too hard on yourself, Lizzie said. They may yet be found. My uncle is in London looking for them, but I don't hold out much hope. Wickham will never marry her. She's too poor for him. Then she will be ruined. A week later, Jane and Lizzie were walking in the garden when Kitty came running from the house. A letter, she cried. A letter has come from Uncle Gardner. Lydia and Wickham are to be married. They found the father in the orchard. The uncle must have given Wickham a great deal of money to marry her. I don't know how I shall ever repay him. Mrs. Bennet leaped from her bed at the news. The shame of Lydia's actions instantly forgotten. My dear, dear Lydia, to be married at 16, how delightful. When Lydia arrived at home, arm in arm with her husband, she was the same Lydia, wild, noisy, unashamed. You must all congratulate me, she said to her sisters, for I am married and you are not, even though I am the youngest. I'm not sure we like your way of getting husband, said Lizzie. But it was such fun, said Lydia, even though the gardeners looked so stunned at our wedding, just like Darcy. Darcy? Cried Lizzie. Lydia clapped her hand over her mouth. Oh, I wasn't meant to tell you. He was there. He arranged it all. Lizzie felt the heart racing. Mr. Darcy had gone to town, searched for Lydia, and saved her from ruin. Had he done it for her? She felt humbled at the thought, but knew she must think of him no more. Lydia and Wickham left for the north, where Wickham was to join a new regiment. Mrs. Bennet declared she felt flat. Now that Lydia had gone, until she heard the news that Mr. Bingley was coming back to Netherfield. It means nothing, said Jane. I shall be able to meet him with perfect calmness. A few days later, he called. Look, cried Kitty, watching him from the window. Has brought his friend with him, the tall, proud man none of us liked. Lizzie buried her head in her book. Jane looked a little paler than usual. Bingley entered, both embarrassed and pleased, and went immediately to Jane's side. Darcy barely spoke, and Lizzie saw he was once again proud and silent. Could I expect it to be otherwise? thought Lizzie. Yet, why did he come? As soon as they had gone, Lizzie and Jane walked out together. I'm glad the first meeting is over, Jane said. Now when we meet, it'll be only as acquaintances. Oh, Jane, take care, laughed Lizzie. I think you're in danger of making him as much in love with you as ever. The Bingley came again on Tuesday and took his usual seat by Jane. Mrs. Bennet couldn't be more excited, continually plotting to leave Bingley and Jane alone together. At last the moment arrived. He called alone, Mr. Darcy having gone to town. One by one, Mrs. Bennet swept the other daughters from the room. When Lizzie returned, Jane's face was aglow with smile. Oh, it's just too much, she cried. Why can't everybody be this happy? We are to be married. Lizzie was delighted. I congratulate you both, said Mr. Bennet. As the rest of the family joined them, you are perfectly suited. Mrs. Bennet could talk of nothing else. £5,000 a year, she cried. Lydia and Wickham were forgotten. Jane was her very best child. Can you believe it? Said Jane that night. When he went to town last year, he really loved me, and only the persuasion that I didn't love him kept him away. If I could only see you as happy, Lizzie. A week after Bingley's proposal, the family was sitting in the drawing room when a carriage was heard on the driveway. It was Lady Catherine de Bourgh. They were all astonished. Lady Catherine stalked into the room, looked around dismissively. I wish to speak to Elizabeth, she declared. You may walk with me on the prettyish little lawn you call a garden. Lizzie went with her, unable to think what she might have to say. Unless, perhaps, she had brought a message from Charlotte. You know, of course, why I have come, said Lady Catherine. I do not, replied Lizzie honestly. Do not trifle with me, Miss Bennet, replied Lady Catherine in an angry tone. I have heard alarming news that you are soon to be married to my nephew Darcy. It cannot be true. Tell me it is not true. Lizzie felt flustered, confused. She didn't know where the story had come from. But most of all, she felt anger at her ladyship's tone. You may ask questions. I may choose not to answer them, she replied. Miss Bennet, do you know who I am? You cannot marry him. You're of no importance in this world. He is a gentleman. I'm a gentleman's daughter. So far we are equal. But who is your mother's family? Why, your uncles and aunts. Will you promise me never to marry him? I will make no such promise. You have just insulted me in every possible way. Lady Catherine swept herself off to her carriage. I shall make sure this marriage never happens, she called out. I am most seriously displeased. Lizzie watched her go, her heart fluttering with anger. She knew Lady Catherine would go straight to Darcy if he had been wondering before what to do. Surely now he would decide never to propose again. But when Bingley came again to visit them, he brought Darcy with him. They set out on a walk together, Bingley falling behind with Jane, until it was just Darcy, Lizzie, and Kitty, and then Kitty left them to visit her friend, and Lizzie bravely went on alone with him. She seized her moment. I've been wanting to thank you for what you did for Lydia, she began. He turned obviously surprised that she knew. I did it thinking of you, he said. There was an uncomfortable pause. If you still feel as you did last April, Darcy went on, please tell me so at once. My affection and wishes are unchanged. Lizzie turned to him then and told him, as well as she could, how much her feelings had changed. Darcy's face flushed with happiness. They walked on without knowing in what direction. Lizzie learned that she had Lady Catherine to thank for Darcy's return. I knew that if you did not love me, you would be frank enough to tell her, said Darcy. What she told me gave me hope. When I proposed before I said unforgivable things, I was proud. Let's not think of it, said Lizzie. Neither of us have behaved well. You must have hated me after that evening. At first I was angry, but only at myself. I tried to show you eventually how I had changed. By the time they arrived home, it was dark. Darcy went straight to Mr. Bennet, while Lizzie sought out her mother. £10,000 a year, she cried. All her former dislike of Darcy vanishing in an instant. We could only be relieved that Mr. Darcy was not around to hear it. After Darcy had left, Mr. Bennet called Lizzie to him. I gave my consent at once, he told her. He's not in the sort of man you refuse, but do you really love him? He's rich, but I thought you despised him. I do like him, I do, she replied, the tears in her eyes. I love him. You do not know what he really is. It took a long time for Lizzie to persuade her father that she would be truly happy with Darcy. At least, he said, if this is the case, he deserves you. I couldn't have parted with you, my Lizzie, for anyone less worthy. As she left the room, he added, if any young man come from Mary or Kitty, send them in, for I am quite at leisure. The end.